What is the price of dignity? For one of the most powerful black women in corporate America, the answer was $200 million. This isn't just a story about a seat on an airplane. It's a story about the moment a quiet request became a thunderous statement heard from the boardrooms of New York to the financial heart of London. It's about a flight attendant's casual bias, a so-called VIP's staggering arrogance, and the woman who held a multi-million-dollar empire in her hands and chose to let it all go to prove a point. You are about to hear the inside story of how a single act of disrespect on Global Air Flight 17 led to a corporate meltdown, a family dynasty's public disgrace, and the kind of hard karma that only real life can deliver. Stay tuned. The London air on that crisp May evening had the electric hum of victory. Dr. Evelyn Reed, founder and CEO of Stratos Bioinnovations, stood on the balcony of the penthouse suite at the Shangri-La, overlooking the glittering tapestry of the city. The Shard, the very building she stood in, pierced the twilight sky like a testament to human ambition. Her own ambition had just reached a new zenith. In her hand, she held a crystal glass of Macallan 25, the amber liquid catching the light. It was a celebratory drink. Just hours earlier, in a sterile, glass-walled boardroom in Canary Wharf, she had signed the single largest deal in her company's history, a $200 million sponsorship agreement with Sterling Automotive, the legendary British luxury car manufacturer. The deal wasn't just about money, it was about legacy. Stratos Bio, a leader in advanced biocompatible materials, would be the title sponsor and exclusive materials partner for Sterling's audacious new venture, the Sterling E-Prix, a global electric racing league poised to redefine motorsports. Evelyn was not just a CEO, she was a scientist, a visionary who had built her empire from a single patent developed during her postdoctoral work at MIT. She was 48 years old, a stunning woman whose poised elegance was as sharp as her intellect. Her custom-tailored Tom Ford suit spoke of power, but her eyes, deep and thoughtful, held the story of a girl from Houston's Third Ward who had outthought, outworked, and outmaneuvered everyone who ever told her she couldn't. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus Vance, her CFO and confidant. "Board is ecstatic. Wire transfers initiated. You did it, Ev. You actually did it." She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that she rarely shared. She typed back, "We did it. See you in New York. I'm on the 9 p.m. The deal with Sterling Automotive had been a brutal 6-month negotiation. Its patriarch, Julian Sterling Sr., was old guard British industry, a formidable silver-haired tycoon, known for his Savile Row suits and ruthless business acumen. He saw the future in electric vehicles, but clung to the traditions of the past. He respected Evelyn's brilliance, but viewed her with a sort of anthropological curiosity. An African-American woman, a PhD, a self-made billionaire. She was an anomaly in his world of inherited wealth and Oxbridge pleasantries. Still, he couldn't deny her company's value. Stratos Bio's proprietary carbon fiber composites were lighter, stronger, and more sustainable than anything on the market. They were the key to Sterling's E-Prix cars having a competitive edge. And so the deal was done. As she packed her carry-on, Evelyn's thoughts drifted. The exhaustion of the past week settled deep in her bones, but it was a satisfying ache. She had earned this. She had earned the glass of scotch the penthouse suite, and she had certainly earned her first-class seat 2A on Global Air Flight 117 back to JFK. It was more than just a comfortable chair. It was a symbol, a small acknowledgement of the heights she had reached. A quiet space to decompress, to transition from the titan of industry back to just Evelyn. At Heathrow, the Global Air First Class lounge was an oasis of hushed tones and clinking porcelain. She was greeted by name, her coat, taken a glass of champagne offered. She settled into a plush leather armchair, pulling out a well-worn copy of a book by the late, great Dr. Charles Drew, a pioneer in blood storage techniques, whose work she had admired since she was a student. She read not for information, but for inspiration, to ground herself in the lineage of black excellence she felt a duty to uphold. When her flight was called, she walked the exclusive jet bridge to the Boeing 777. The first-class cabin was a cocoon of privacy and understated luxury. 8 individual suites each with a lie-flat bed, a personal minibar, and a polished mahogany privacy screen. She found her suite 2A, a window seat on the port side. She slid her Patek Philippe watch from her wrist, placing it carefully in the valuables drawer, and settled into the supple leather. Home was 8 hours away. A flight attendant approached a woman in her late 40s with a tightly pinned blonde bun and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her name tag read, Brenda. "Good evening, Dr. Reed," Brenda said, her voice a practiced saccharine melody. "Can I get you a pre-departure beverage? Some more champagne, perhaps just sparkling water with a slice of lime. Thank you, Brenda." Evelyn replied, her voice warm but concise. As Brenda returned with the water, she lingered for a moment. "I see you were just in the city for business. Anything exciting?" The question was standard, but the tone had a faint edge of prying curiosity. A successful trip, Evelyn said, offering a polite but firm conversational dead end. She wanted peace, not small talk. Brenda took the hint and retreated to the galley. The cabin slowly filled. A tech mogul she vaguely recognized from a Forbes article took a seat across the aisle. An older couple dripping in quiet luxury settled into the row behind her. The familiar pre-flight ballet of stowing bags and settling in played out. Evelyn put on her noise-cancelling headphones, selected a classical playlist, and closed her eyes, letting the gentle strains of Debussy wash over her. The engines began to spool up with a low, powerful hum. Victory was sweet. The flight home was her reward. She had no idea it was about to become a battlefield. The calm was shattered just before the cabin door was due to be sealed. A flurry of motion at the entrance to the first-class cabin drew Evelyn's eye. A young man, probably in his late 20s, strode in with the kind of unearned confidence that only generational wealth can bestow. He was handsome in a generic, forgettable way, a sharp suit that was likely more expensive than her own, but worn without the same sense of purpose. His blonde hair was artfully messy, and he was speaking loudly into his phone. No, tell him the Monaco deal is contingent on the marina access. I don't care what the zoning board says, just buy them. Ciao." He snapped his phone shut and scanned the cabin with an air of ownership. Brenda, the flight attendant, hurried over to him, her demeanor instantly transformed. The practiced politeness she'd shown Evelyn was replaced by an almost sycophantic eagerness. "Mr. Sterling, welcome aboard. We are so honored to have you with us today. Can I take your jacket? Let me get you settled in." Evelyn's blood ran cold for a fraction of a second. Sterling. It had to be a coincidence. Sterling was a common enough name. She tried to dismiss it, turning her gaze back toward her window. The young man, Julian Sterling Jr., handed his jacket to Brenda without a glance, and then looked at his boarding pass with disgust. "Seat 3D, an aisle seat." "You're joking. My sincerest apologies, sir." Brenda gushed. "The flight is completely full tonight. We tried to make arrangements, but it was a last-minute booking." Julian Jr. scoffed a sound of pure, unadulterated entitlement. "Unacceptable. My father practically owns this airline. I need a window seat. I need to sleep." He gestured vaguely toward the left side of the plane. "What about that one?" He was pointing directly at Evelyn's suite 2A. Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She kept her headphones on, pretending to be oblivious, but she was listening to every word. This was a test. It was always a test. Brenda's eyes darted nervously toward Evelyn. She lowered her voice, but in the quiet cabin it was still audible. "That seat is occupied, Mr. Sterling. By Dr. Reed. Doctor. He sneered, the word dripping with disdain. A medical doctor. Is someone dying? I don't see an emergency. Move her. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Brenda, caught between her duty to a paying passenger and her desire to appease the son of a man she clearly perceived as a higher power, took a deep breath and approached Evelyn's suite. She tapped gently on Evelyn's armrest. Evelyn slowly removed her headphones, fixing Brenda with a calm, neutral gaze. Yes, Dr. Reed. My apologies for the disturbance. Brenda began, her smile now strained and artificial. We have a very special guest with us tonight, Mr. Julian Sterling, Jr. Due to a last-minute booking error, he was assigned an aisle seat. He is one of our most valued VIPs, and he strongly prefers a window. Evelyn's expression didn't change. She said nothing, letting the silence hang in the air, forcing Brenda to continue. We were wondering. Brenda stammered, her gaze flickering toward Julian Jr., who was now watching them with impatient arrogance, if you would be so kind as to switch seats with him. Seat 3D is also a lovely suite. Evelyn took a slow, deliberate breath. She looked past Brenda to the young man who met her gaze, not with embarrassment, but with an expectant smirk. He was the son of Julian Sterling, Sr. The realization landed with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a coincidence. This was the universe presenting her with the most poetic, most infuriating irony she had ever faced. The son of the man with whom she had just signed a $200 million deal believed he was entitled to her seat simply because of who he was. No, Evelyn said. The word was quiet, but it was as solid and unyielding as granite. Brenda blinked, taken aback. Passengers in first class rarely said no. I beg your pardon. The answer is no. Evelyn repeated, her voice still level, betraying none of the fury coiling in her gut. I chose this seat for a reason. I paid for it, and I will be staying in it. Please tell Mr. Sterling that seat 3D is, as you said, a lovely suite. She began to put her headphones back on a clear sign that the conversation was over. But Julian Jr. was not to be dismissed. He strode over, brushing past Brenda as if she were a piece of furniture. He leaned down, placing his hands on the polished mahogany edge of her suite, invading her personal space. The faint, cloying scent of expensive cologne filled the air. Listen, sweetheart, he began, his voice low and condescending. I think you misunderstood. I'm not asking. I'm Julian Sterling. As in Sterling Automotive. My father spends more money with this airline in a year than you'll make in your lifetime. Now be a good girl and move to the other seat. The cabin had gone silent. The tech mogul was pointedly staring at his laptop, but he wasn't typing. The elderly couple were whispering to each other. Every person in that cabin was now a witness. Evelyn's fury, which had been a coiled serpent, began to rise, but on the surface she was ice. She looked at his hands on her suite, and then up into his pale, arrogant eyes. Remove your hands from my personal space, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more menace than a shout. And you will address me as Dr. Reed, not sweetheart, not good girl, Dr. Reed. Julian Jr. actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. Dr. Reed, of what I wonder, feminist studies. You have no idea who you're talking to. Oh, I believe I do. Evelyn said, her eyes boring into his. You're Julian Sterling, Jr., son of Julian Sterling, Sr., CEO of Sterling Automotive, the company with which my company, Stratos Bio Innovations, just signed a 9-figure partnership agreement this afternoon. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by smugness. Stratos what? Never heard of it. Probably some diversity initiative my father's PR team cooked up. See, this all works out. You work for me, in a manner of speaking. Now the seat. That was it. That was the moment the deal died. Diversity initiative. The phrase, tossed off with such casual, venomous disdain, invalidated everything. Her PhD from MIT, the years in the lab, the sleepless nights building her company, the brutal negotiations, the $200 million contract that was at that very moment being celebrated by her board. He had reduced her life's work to a token gesture. He hadn't just insulted her, he had insulted her legacy. A slow, dangerous smile touched Evelyn's lips. It was a smile that her corporate rivals had learned to fear. It meant the battle was already over, and she had won. Brenda Evelyn, said her voice, now carrying a formal executive chill. You have a choice to make. You can either tell your VIP to take his assigned seat and prepare the cabin for departure, or you can become a part of a much larger, much more regrettable incident. The choice is yours. Brenda looked from Evelyn's glacial calm to Julian Jr.'s reddening face. She was utterly out of her depth. She wrung her hands. Mr. Sterling. Sir? Perhaps 3D would be— Are you insane? Julian Jr. hissed at Brenda, then turned back to Evelyn. You've just made the biggest mistake of your career. I'll have you fired by the time we land. I'd like to see you try, Evelyn said, finally putting her headphones back on and turning to face the window. She pressed the button to raise the privacy screen between her suite and the aisle. The smooth, quiet whir of the motor was the sound of a door slamming shut. The sound of a final, irrevocable decision being made. The privacy screen rose, encasing Evelyn in her suite. But it offered no peace. The silence was louder than Julian Jr., as insults. It was the silence of her own roaring thoughts. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not with fear, but with a cold, clarifying rage. Diversity initiative. The words echoed each syllable a fresh cut. He hadn't just dismissed her, he had erased her. He saw her skin, her gender, and constructed a narrative that fit his worldview. She was a token, a box, to be checked, someone whose presence in a powerful space could only be explained as a charitable handout from a man like his father. He hadn't seen Dr. Evelyn Reed, CEO of Stratos Bio Innovations. He had seen a black woman who was in his way. She thought of her father, a mechanic who worked 2 jobs in the Houston heat, his knuckles permanently stained with grease. He used to tell her, Evie, nobody gives you respect. You don't ask for it. You command it. You build your house so strong out of bricks of your own making that nobody can tell you where to sit in it. She had built that house. Stratos Bio was that house. And this boy, this pampered princeling, had just tried to relegate her to the servants' quarters in her own damn home. His threat to have her fired was laughable. But his ability to poison the well, to whisper in his father's ear, to frame this as her being difficult or uppity, that was real. Julian Sterling Sr. was old school. He valued deference. He might see this as an insult to his family, a breach of decorum. He might try to renegotiate terms to assert dominance, to put her back in her place. Evelyn stared out the window at the scurrying ground crew on the tarmac. No, she would not allow that. She would not spend the next 5 years in a partnership with a family that viewed her as a subordinate. She would not allow the Sterling E-Pre, powered by her technology, to become a global platform for a man like Julian Jr., to swan about, accepting accolades built on the work of a woman he didn't even have the decency to respect. The deal wasn't just about money, it was about mutual respect, and that foundation had just been dynamited. She would not be difficult. She would not be uppity. She would be decisive. She would command respect just as her father taught her. She was going to tear down the house they were meant to build together. And she was going to do it now. The plane began its slow taxi toward the runway. Evelyn reached into her briefcase and pulled out her laptop. She paid for the premium in-flight Wi-Fi, the fastest available. The connection was slow but stable. It was all she needed. First, she sent a coded message on a secure messaging app to her inner circle, Marcus Vance, CFO, and Jessica Chen, her head of PR, and a master of corporate warfare. Code Indigo. I repeat, Code Indigo. Sterling Partnership. Full termination. On my authority. Stand by for instructions. No comms until we land. Code Indigo was a protocol they had war-gamed but never used. It signified a catastrophic unilateral executive action requiring immediate and total lockdown of all external communications until a formal strategy could be deployed. Within 60 seconds, she received 2 identical replies, a single checkmark emoji. They understood. They were ready. Next, she drafted an email to her legal team at the prestigious New York firm of Rosenberg and Finch, a firm known for its ferocious litigation department. Subject urgent and privileged. Termination of Sterling Automotive Agreement. To the team. Effective immediately, I am invoking Clause 28B of the Sterling Automotive Partnership Agreement pertaining to acts of gross misconduct and reputational disparagement by a key principal. Stratos Bio Innovations is hereby terminating the agreement in its entirety. Prepare all necessary documentation for breach of contract and begin the process of clawing back the initial wire transfer, citing material misrepresentation of partnership ethos. I have a full record of the inciting incident. We will be moving for damages. I will be incommunicado until we land at JFK ETA 7:00 p.m. EST. Have a preliminary injunction ready by the time I'm through customs. Dr. Evelyn Reed. She attached a file, a voice memo she had discreetly started recording on her phone when Julian Jr. had first approached her suite. The entire exchange, including his sweetheart and diversity initiative comments, was captured in crystal-clear audio. Finally, the last and most important email. This one was to the man himself, Julian Sterling Sr. She knew he would be at a celebratory dinner in London, likely at Oswald's or some other exclusive Mayfair club, toasting their new venture. This email would be the ghost at his feast. She typed with a surgeon's precision, each word carefully chosen, devoid of emotion, clinical and devastating. Subject termination of partnership agreement. Julian, I am writing to you from my seat 2A on Global Air Flight 117. Approximately 30 minutes ago, I was approached by your son, Julian Sterling Jr., who was also a passenger. He demanded I vacate my seat for him. When I declined, he chose to address me in a manner that was not only personally insulting, but fundamentally incompatible with the spirit of the partnership our 2 companies signed just this morning. He publicly and loudly referred to my company, my life's work, as a diversity initiative your father had likely cooked up. He did not know who I was, and that is the point. He believed me to be an anonymous woman of color who could be intimidated and displaced according to his whim. This single act has revealed a sickness at the heart of your organization's culture that no amount of money or technology can cure. It is not a culture Stratos Bio will align with. Pursuant to Clause 28B of our agreement, Stratos Bio Innovations hereby terminates our $200 million partnership, effective immediately. Our legal team at Rosenberg and Finch has been instructed to act accordingly. The respect that must underpin a venture of this magnitude has been irrevocably broken. We will not be your diversity initiative. Sincerely, Dr. Evelyn Reed, founder and CEO, Stratos Bio Innovations. She read it over once. It was perfect, cold, factual, and brutal. It gave him no wiggle room, no space to claim misunderstanding. It quoted the sun, defined the injury, and executed the consequence. Her finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. This would ignite a firestorm. It would dominate the business news for weeks. It would make her a pariah in some circles and a hero in others. It would cost her company a guaranteed $200 million. She thought of the young black women in STEM programs she mentored. What would she tell them to endure disrespect for the sake of a deal? To smile and accept being called a good girl by an entitled boy so that they could have a seat at the table. No. She would tell them to build their own damn table. And if someone tried to tell them where to sit, they should flip that table over and build a better one. She pressed send. The email icon vanished into the ether. The plane's engines roared to life, pressing her back into her seat as it hurtled down the runway. She was flying toward New York, but she was also flying into a war she had just declared, and for the first time in hours a feeling of profound peace settled over her. The cost was high, but the price of her dignity was not negotiable. For the next 7 hours, the first-class cabin of Flight 117 was a hermetically sealed chamber of unspoken tension. Evelyn put on a movie, though she didn't watch a single frame. She ordered a meal, though she only picked at the seared tuna. On the other side of the privacy screen, she could occasionally hear Julian Jr. complaining to the cabin crew about the wine selection, the turbulence, the thread count of the blanket. He was oblivious, a fool playing with his toys in the ruins of a city he didn't know he had just burned down. Brenda, however, was a wreck. Every time she walked past Evelyn's suite, she averted her eyes. Her practiced smile had vanished, replaced by a pale, pinched expression of pure anxiety. She knew something had shifted, that she had made a terrible miscalculation. She had backed the wrong horse, and now she was trapped in the air with the consequences. The true storm broke the moment the plane's wheels touched down on the tarmac at John F. Kennedy International Airport. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, Evelyn switched her phone off airplane mode. It was an avalanche. The screen lit up with a relentless vibrating torrent of notifications. Texts, secure messages, emails, missed calls. It was a digital scream. From Marcus Vance, her CFO, Holist Evelyn. Sterling Saar called my cell, screaming, "Their lawyers are in panic mode. Jessica has a statement ready. Awaiting your go." From Jessica Chen, her PR head code. Indigo confirmed. Comms locked. Media blackout in place. Draft statement. A aggressive, B conciliatory, and C factual neutral are in your inbox. I recommend C. Bloomberg has a source on the flight. Story is breaking in 30 mins, with or without our comment. We need to get ahead of it. From her lead counsel at Rosenberg and Finch, Dr. Reed email received. Voice memo is damning. We have our injunction. Sterling's counsel, Sullivan and Cromwell, has contacted us requesting an emergency mediation. We have respectfully declined. Awaiting your signal to file publicly. And then there were the emails. A chain from Julian Sterling Sr. himself. The progression was a masterclass in the 5 stages of grief for a billionaire losing a deal. Email 1, 9:45 p.m. London time denial. Dr. Reed, I have just received your ludicrous email. There must be some misunderstanding. My son is young and perhaps overzealous. I'm sure this can be smoothed over. Email 2:10:15 p.m. London time. Anger. This is an outrageous overreaction. You would throw away a landmark deal over a trifle. This is unprofessionalism of the highest order. You will find that my influence is long, and this decision will be ruinous for your company and your reputation. Email 3:10:40 p.m. London time bargaining. Evelyn, let's be reasonable. I will have my son issue a full written apology. We can amend the contract, add a personal conduct clause. I will even make a sizable donation to a charity of your choice. Let us not act rashly. Email 4:11:30 p.m. London time depression. I have spoken to my son. I see. I am disappointed. Please call me as soon as you land. Evelyn didn't have time to process it all. The cabin door opened. She was one of the first to disembark her briefcase, in hand, her expression an unreadable mask of calm. As she walked down the jet bridge, she saw him. Julian Jr. was ahead of her, swaggering toward customs, laughing on his phone. He was still utterly unaware that his world was collapsing behind him. Evelyn was met at the gate by a prearranged airport VIP escort, designed to whisk her through the diplomatic channel of customs and immigration. As she was being led away, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but it had a UK country code. she answered. Evelyn. This is Julian Sterling. His voice was strained, the blustering anger gone, replaced by a desperate, frayed edge. You cannot do this. Think of the markets. Think of our employees, our shareholders. This is bigger than a squabble on an airplane. Evelyn stopped walking. The escort paused, waiting for her. The noise of the terminal faded into the background. Julian, she said, her voice like ice. The time for that conversation was before your son confused my value as a CEO with my value as a human being. He didn't just insult me. He insulted every woman, every person of color who has ever had to justify their presence in a room where they belong. The deal is dead, and you would be wise to direct your lawyers to speak only to my lawyers from this point forward. She hung up before he could reply. She looked at her messages again, focusing on Jessica's advice. Bloomberg has a source. Someone else in that cabin had already talked. The story was coming out anyway. She could either let them frame it, or she could frame it herself. In the back of the black Escalade that was speeding her toward Manhattan, she opened the draft Jessica had prepared. Statement C, factual neutral. It was brilliant in its simplicity. It didn't mention Julian Jr. by name. It didn't even mention the airline. It was a masterstroke of corporate communication. She called Jessica. It's Evelyn. Go with C. Post it on all Stratos Bio channels and release it to the wires. Now. Yes, boss. Jessica said, her voice humming with adrenaline. The war room is hot. We're ready. Evelyn hung up and finally leaned her head back against the cool leather of the seat. She closed her eyes. Phase 1 was complete. The counter-offensive had begun. At 8:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as Julian Sterling Jr. was probably ordering a cocktail at a members-only club in Soho, a single unified post appeared on Stratos Bio's official Twitter, LinkedIn, and corporate website. Stratos Bio Innovations has terminated its recently announced partnership with Sterling Automotive. Our company's foundational principles include a commitment to mutual respect, integrity, and dignity. Recent events have made it clear that this partnership would be fundamentally incompatible with these core values. We believe that how you do anything is how you do everything. We wish Sterling Automotive well in their future endeavors. The statement was stark professional and devastatingly vague. It was a lit match dropped into a warehouse of gasoline. Within minutes, the internet exploded. The business world, which had been cheering the mega deal just hours before, was thrown into a state of collective shock. On Wall Street and in the City of London, traders stared at their terminals in disbelief. A $200 million deal celebrated in the morning was dead by nightfall. Why Hashio's Stratos Bio and Handar Sterling Automotive began trending worldwide. Speculation was rampant. Was it a financial issue, a last-minute regulatory snag? Did a competitor swoop in? Then, at 8:27 p.m., Bloomberg dropped its bombshell, citing a source with direct knowledge of the events on Global Air Flight 117. The story laid out the basic facts. A high-level executive at Stratos Bio had been asked to give up her first-class seat for a VIP connected to Sterling Automotive. The executive refused, was verbally accosted, and the deal was scuttled in mid-air. The story didn't name Evelyn or Julian Jr., but the pieces were there. The internet, a crowd-sourcing super sleuth, did the rest. Flight manifests aren't public, but first-class cabins are small. Someone remembered seeing the tech mogul post an Instagram story from the lounge. Another passenger, an investment banker, in seat 4A, sent a discreet email to a friend at a gossip blog. By 10 p.m., the names were out. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the self-made black billionaire. Julian Sterling Jr., the playboy heir. The narrative shifted with whiplash-inducing speed. It was no longer a business story. It was a human story. A story of arrogance versus integrity, of privilege versus merit. Evelyn, secluded in her Manhattan penthouse, watched the wildfire she had started rage across the digital world. Her PR team, led by Jessica, worked with military precision, feeding select confirmatory details to trusted journalists at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal to ensure the narrative stayed on her terms. They released the audio file to their legal team only, but its existence was strategically leaked. A source confirms Stratos Bio is in possession of an audio recording of the entire exchange. That single sentence was checkmate. It shut down any possibility for the Sterlings to deny or spin the details. Sterling Automotive's response was a disaster. At 11 p.m., their London-based PR firm clearly caught off guard, and operating without all the facts released, a statement Sterling Automotive is surprised and disappointed by Stratos Bio's abrupt decision. We are investigating a reported minor disagreement on a flight and believe any issues can be resolved amicably. We have the utmost respect for Dr. Reed and her company. The word minor disagreement was gasoline on the fire. The internet mob descended. A minor disagreement? Is that what you call trying to bully a black woman out of a seat she paid for one viral tweet read? The utter arrogance. They still don't get it, wrote a prominent activist. Global Air, the airline, went into full panic mode. They immediately suspended the flight attendant, Brenda pending an investigation. Their social media was flooded with outrage, with thousands of users sharing their own stories of poor treatment and casual discrimination, all under the new hashtag or flying while black. For Evelyn, it was a vindication, but a heavy one. She was lauded as a hero. Forbes ran a headline, "Dignity over dollars, Dr. Evelyn Reed's $200 million lesson in respect." Black women in corporate roles across the world flooded her inbox and social media with messages of support. She had given voice to a frustration they had all felt, the 1,000 tiny cuts of disrespect they were expected to endure in silence. But the most telling moment came from a place she didn't expect. The tech mogul from across the aisle, a man named Ben Carter, CEO of a major cybersecurity firm, released a statement of his own. "I was in the first-class cabin and witnessed the exchange between Mr. Sterling Jr. and Dr. Evelyn Reed. The initial report from Bloomberg is accurate. Dr. Reed's conduct was a masterclass in poise and professionalism in the face of shocking entitlement and disrespect. Our industry needs more leaders like Dr. Reed. It was a public corroboration from an unimpeachable source. The Sterling Empire had no defense left. The court of public opinion had delivered its verdict. Now it was time for the karma of the real world to catch up. Karma, Evelyn had always believed, wasn't a mystical force. It was simply the logical, often delayed consequence of one's actions. For the Sterlings, for Brenda, and for Global Air, the consequences arrived not as a gentle rain, but as a biblical flood. The next morning, when the London Stock Exchange opened, Sterling Automotive STL.L was a bloodbath. The stock opened down 15%. In the first hour of trading, it lost over $2 billion in market value. The reason was twofold. First, the loss of the Stratos Bio partnership jeopardized the entire ePre venture, which had been the cornerstone of their future growth strategy. Without Stratos Bio's cutting-edge materials, their cars were no longer revolutionary. Second and more damaging was the reputational implosion. Sterling was a luxury brand. Its image was built on a century of cultivated prestige, heritage, and class. That image was now being defined by a spoiled heir and a story of ugly entitlement. Luxury car buyers don't want to be associated with that. Julian Sterling Sr. was in full-blown crisis mode. He convened an emergency board meeting. The independent directors, spooked by the stock collapse, and the PR nightmare, were sharpening their knives. The call for a scapegoat was deafening, and there was only one possible candidate. The climax came in a sterile, soundproofed office in Sterling Tower. Julian Sr., his face pale and haggard, confronted his son. Julian Jr., finally grasping the magnitude of the disaster, was a shadow of his former self. The swagger was gone, replaced by a whining desperation. "Father, you have to fix this. Apologize, pay her more money. Do something," he pleaded. Julian Sr. looked at his son, and for the first time saw not his heir, but a liability. "Fix this," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You are the one thing I can't fix. You have taken a century of work, of my father's work, of my work, and you have set it on fire for a bloody airplane seat." "I didn't know who she was," Julian Jr. cried. "And that is the entire problem," his father roared, his composure finally cracking. "You should not have needed to know who she was. You should have seen a person and shown basic human decency. You have cost us our future. You have embarrassed our name. You are no longer on the board. Your executive title is revoked, and I am instructing my attorneys to begin the process of removing you from the family trust. You are on your own." The words hung in the air, more brutal than any financial loss. Julian Sterling Jr., the boy who had everything, was now facing the prospect of having nothing. He was publicly disgraced, disowned, and disinherited. His fall was as swift as it was complete. Brenda's fate was less dramatic, but just as devastating. Global Air fired her within 48 hours for failure to follow established de-escalation protocols and for demonstrating profound bias in passenger treatment. The flight attendants' union made a token effort to defend her, but with the threat of a major lawsuit from Dr. Reed and the overwhelming negative press, they quickly abandoned the cause. She was blacklisted. Her name, leaked by angry airline insiders, became synonymous with poor service and prejudice. No major carrier would touch her. She tried applying to smaller budget airlines, but her story was too infamous. Within 6 months, the woman who had lauded her minor authority over a first-class cabin was working at a coffee shop kiosk in a suburban New Jersey train station, haunted by the memory of the quiet, powerful woman in seat 2A, whose life she had tried to disrupt, only to have her own life derailed in the process. For the airline, the fallout was systemic. Dr. Reed's lawyers at Rosenberg and Finch, armed with the audio recording and witness statements, approached Global Air not with a lawsuit, but with a proposition. They could face a multi-hundred-million-dollar public lawsuit for discrimination that would drag their name through the mud for years, or they could take meaningful structural action. Faced with a no-win scenario, Global Air chose the latter. They entered into a sweeping settlement agreement. They issued a public apology to Dr. Reed. They overhauled their entire customer service and bias training programs, hiring a leading diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy firm, one recommended by Evelyn herself. They also made a multi-million-dollar donation to a non-profit organization Evelyn had founded years earlier, the Vanguard Initiative, dedicated to funding STEM scholarships for underprivileged minority students. The airline's capitulation was total. Evelyn Reed watched the dominoes fall, not with glee, but with a solemn sense of justice. She had not sought to ruin lives, but to demand accountability. The story had made her an icon. Stratos Bio, far from being ruined as Julian Sr. had threatened, saw its own stock soar. Investors loved her integrity. New partners from aerospace to medical technology were clamoring to work with a company led by a CEO with such an unshakable moral compass. 2 months after the incident, Evelyn held a press conference. She stood before a backdrop bearing the Stratos Bio logo and made an announcement that once again stunned the business world. Integrity is not just a word on a corporate mission statement. It is the core material from which all success is built, she began. The $200 million that was previously allocated for the Sterling Partnership will now be the seed funding for a new Stratos Bio venture. She unveiled Stratos Future Labs, a new incubator and venture capital fund with a singular mission to find and fund the next generation of startups, led by women and underrepresented minorities. We will not wait for a seat at the table, she declared, her voice ringing with passion. We will build a new table, a bigger table. We will fund the founders who have been overlooked. We will invest in the visionaries who have been dismissed. The future does not belong to those who inherit power. It belongs to those who create it. It was a masterstroke. She had turned the cancelled deal into a powerful statement of purpose, redirecting the capital toward building the very thing Julian Jr. had accused her of being, not a diversity initiative, but a powerhouse of diverse talent. The move was hailed globally as one of the most significant philanthropic and business decisions of the decade. She hadn't just won the battle, she had changed the entire landscape of the war. 6 months later, the world looked different from the 80th floor. Evelyn's office at One World Trade Center was less a corporate command post and more a sanctuary of quiet ambition. The chaos of the Global Air incident had receded, leaving in its wake not scars, but a newly forged clarity of purpose. The setting sun bled across the Hudson River, casting long shadows that crept up the glass canyons of Manhattan. The city below was a sprawling circuit board of light and energy, and for the first time in a long time, Evelyn felt completely in sync with its rhythm. Her victory hadn't been loud or explosive. It had been a tectonic shift, a fundamental reordering of her own landscape. The fruits of her stand were tangible and grew more abundant each day. Stratos Bio's stock had not just recovered, it had climbed to unprecedented highs, fueled by an investor base that now saw its leadership not just as innovative, but as possessing an almost mythical level of integrity. Esteemed companies in aerospace and regenerative medicine, who had previously been cautious partners, were now aggressively pursuing joint ventures, eager to align themselves with the Reed standard of ethical business. But that wasn't the victory that mattered most to her. On her expansive desk, next to a holographic schematic of a new polymer chain, lay a progress report bound in simple blue card. It was from Solara Innovations, the sustainable packaging startup founded by Sofia and Isabella Reyes, two brilliant Latina engineers who were the first recipients of funding from Stratos Future Labs. The report detailed their successful prototype of a fully biodegradable material derived from algae, a breakthrough that could eliminate millions of tons of single-use plastic. A small, genuine smile touched Evelyn's lips as she read their enthusiastic, data-filled projections. This was the real dividend. This was the transformation of a $200 million act of defiance into a force for creation. The fund was her true victory, a living testament to the principle that opportunity shouldn't be inherited, but cultivated. It was in this state of quiet satisfaction that her eyes fell upon the object she had been consciously ignoring all day. It lay isolated on a corner of her desk, a stark island on the polished mahogany. It was a single thick envelope made of heavy cream-colored cardstock that spoke of old money and tradition. There was no corporate logo, only a London postmark, and a return address rendered in a shaky, almost spidery cursive J. Sterling. It had been delivered by a private courier that morning, and she'd felt a cold knot in her stomach upon seeing it. It felt like a ghost at the feast, a final, unwanted tether to a conflict she had long since put behind her. The battle was over, the territory won. What could possibly be left to say? For hours she'd let it sit, a silent testament to a world of privilege and power she had exposed and rejected. Now in the twilight, it seemed to demand a final audience. With a sigh that carried the weight of the last 6 months, she picked it up. The paper felt heavy, substantial, like a formal surrender. Using a sleek silver letter opener, a gift from the Vanguard Initiative scholars, she slit the envelope with surgical precision. Inside was a single sheet of matching paper, folded once. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope, the elegant script of a man taught penmanship as a virtue, now faltering under the strain of age and circumstance. Dr. Reed, I write this letter knowing full well there are no words in the English language that can adequately apologize for the actions of my son, nor for my own initial, pathetically arrogant reaction to the situation you described. I have had 6 months in a world of my own making's wreckage to reflect. You were right. In every conceivable sense of the word, you were right. I have spent a lifetime building an empire of machines and money, believing that was the measure of a man. In doing so, I raised a son who understood the price of a first-class ticket, but was ignorant of the value of the person sitting in the seat. He has been stripped of his titles and his inheritance, a hollow gesture that does nothing to undo the ugliness of his behavior. The damage he did to your dignity that night was appalling. He called your life's work a diversity initiative. I now see that my entire life's work was the initiative, a project in pride that lacked a diverse and human perspective. The damage he did to our family's name is a stain I will carry to my grave. But it is your response that has haunted my waking hours. You did not merely retaliate. You transformed. To take the capital from our dead partnership and channel it into a force for creation and opportunity. It was a lesson in leadership so profound that I was too old and too proud to have ever learned it on my own. You did not just expose a flaw in my son. You exposed the moral bankruptcy of my world. I have seen the interviews with the young founders you are now funding. You have built your house from bricks of integrity, and it is a cathedral. I see now that mine was a tower built on the sand of assumption. I do not write this letter asking for your forgiveness, as it is a grace I have not earned. I simply write this to offer what little I have left of value my profound and unconditional respect. Sincerely, Julian Sterling. Evelyn read the letter twice then, a third time. The air in the room seemed to stand still. There was no surge of triumphant adrenaline, no satisfying punch of victory. The rage she had felt on that airplane was a distant, cold star. In its place was a vast, quiet melancholy. She felt a flicker of pity for the broken man who wrote those words, a man stripped bare of his pride, left with nothing but the rubble of his legacy. This letter wasn't a corporate maneuver. It was a confession. She closed her eyes, and for a fleeting moment she was back in Houston, a young girl listening to her father's stories about arrogant bosses and the small indignities he had to swallow to keep his job. She thought of the countless women who had been called sweetheart in a boardroom, the brilliant minds dismissed as tokens. This letter, in a way, was for all of them. Slowly she folded the single sheet of paper, creasing it carefully along its original lines. She did not throw it away. Instead, she stood, walked to a sleek filing cabinet, and placed it inside a folder marked simply Sterling. It was not a trophy to be displayed, but an artifact to be archived. A case closed, a final accounting. She returned to the vast window, pressing her hand against the cool glass. The city glittered below an infinite river of lights. 6 months ago she had seen it as a landscape she had conquered. Now she saw it differently. Each light was a story, a mind, a potential dream waiting for a chance. Her fight on Flight 117 had never truly been about a seat. It was about the right to occupy any space you have earned. The victory wasn't in punishing Julian Sterling Jr. or humbling his father. The victory was in building Stratos Future Labs. The victory was in funding Sophia and Isabella Reyes. The true victory wasn't in tearing an old world down, but in building a new one. And from the 80th floor, Dr. Evelyn Reed could see the foundations being laid, stretching all the way to the horizon. The story of Dr. Evelyn Reed isn't just about corporate karma. It's a powerful reminder that our true value is not determined by our title or our bank account, but by the principles we refuse to compromise. She faced a choice that many of us face, in smaller ways every day, the choice between compliance and conscience, between accepting disrespect and demanding dignity. Her story proves that integrity is the ultimate currency, and that sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to walk away not in defeat, but in a quiet declaration of your own worth. She didn't just cancel a deal, she started a movement. What did you think of Dr. Reed's decision? Was her response justified, or was it an overreaction? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story resonated with you, and you believe in the power of integrity, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We bring you more true stories of justice, karma, and the moments that change everything. Thanks for watching.